Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby and welcome to a World of Tanks patch 9.5 preview video. We are looking at one of the mission reward tanks, the tier 9 medium, the T-55A, which I'm very excited about because it combines a T-62A and a T-54, but it's a German medium tank. This vehicle was produced from 1962 to 1970 and given to East Germany by the USSR. And so if you have excellent German medium crews, but you've never managed to get to the T-54, then this might be the vehicle for you. I'm going to let you know everything that you need to know about the T-55A, and then I've got some gameplay coming right up in it. So to be able to get the T-55A, you are going to have to do a series of personal missions, in a feature that will be added in the next patch. Once you've managed to get through them, you will be rewarded with the Tier 9 German medium tank in your garage. Now this tank appears as a premium, and that means that you're going to be able to use your German medium tank crews from other vehicles inside this without a crew penalty. However, I will hasten to add that this tank does not currently make lots of credits. It doesn't get that premium tank credit multiplier, as it is a reward tank, but it still can use your crews in the premium kind of way. Now I'm going to be comparing this tank directly to the T-54. It has 50 more hit points at 1,700. It weighs 2.5 tons more at nearly 38 tons, but its horsepower on its engine is 120 less. It gets the same engine power as a T-62A, as well as an equal top speed 50 km an hour, which is 6 km an hour lower than the T-54. However, the traverse speed is slightly better than the T-54 at an awesome 50 degrees a second. Now the hull armor is the main difference between the T-54 and the T-55A. The T-55A gets very similar hull armor to the T-62A, which is worse than the Tier 9 Soviet medium tank, the T-54. You are going to have 20 millimeters less of frontal hull armor. And let's just take a quick look in Tank Inspector as what kind of effective angles you're going to be getting out of this hull armor. So here is the T-54, the Tier 9 Soviet medium tank. Its frontal hull armor ranges, if at this kind of an angle, from about 260 to the near side of 220, and the lower plate is just as thick at this angle. Now if we look at the T-55A at the same angle, this goes down to 220 to 200. And on the lower plate, it's about the same. So we've lost between about 40 to 60 millimeters of effective armor off the frontal plate. And in real terms, this is the difference between being penetrated by an IS-3 and not being penetrated by an IS-3. And if we're not angling our hull armor, we can see the middle of the plate on the T-54 is nearly 200, whereas the T-55A is 170. And that's the difference between being penetrated by an Su-100 and not. And so what this means is that the T-55A has to be very careful, especially against those lower tiered targets that the T-54 does not, at least with regards to its hull armor. Thankfully, its turret armor more or less performs exactly the same. And if you manage to get this tank hull down, it will be very resilient indeed. You're looking at between about 200 in some parts, up to 500 in auto ricochets, depending on the angle that the opponents hit you. But what about the mobility of the tank? The fact that the vehicle is heavier and it gets a lower horsepower on its engine. Well, this is where the hidden stats that they don't show you in the garage come into play. This vehicle has excellent ground resistances on its chassis, a lot like a T-62A and the Object 140. You might have noticed in-game that whereas the T-54 does get that 700 brake horsepower engine, its older brother, the Object 140, gets a horsepower of 580, which is the same on this new T-55A. Yet if you're an Object 140 driver, you'll know they're pretty much just as mobile as the T-54 is. And that's because of these terrain resistances. And the terrain resistances on the T-55A are excellent. They are much, much better than the T-54. On hard terrain, it's 0.67, which is nearly 0.3 better than the T-54, which is mirrored on medium terrain, and on soft terrain, it's 1.34, which is vastly better than the T-54, which gets 2.1. So what this means for you is that the T-55A is basically just as mobile as the T-54. So what about the gun it gets? Well, this is the fantastic feature on this vehicle. It gets 100mm, which is very comparable to the T-54's gun. But it's slightly better. That's right, the gun on this reward tank is going to be better than the standard variant. It fires 0.2 quicker, is 0.02 more accurate, and has 0.2 better aim time. However, remember this is the test server and things are subject to change. I can only go on what we have currently seen, and as it stands, the gun on the T-55A is definitely better in every way than the gun on the T-54. Apart from that, we find that the T-55A has a great turret traverse at 46, that's 2 degrees per second better than the T-54, and it's also got 5 meters extra view range. Now this is a gorgeous looking tank as well. When we compare it to the T-54, it is basically embellished. A lot like what they did with the Fury. The T-55A's model just looks awesome and it's a joy to drive around. But that's quite enough of that, let's take a look at how it performs in some gameplay. So here we go, we are playing on Corellia in our T-55A, and don't think that this is a modification to the minimap. This is now standard in-game. You have a directional indication as to which way you're looking. So as we can see here, the T-55A is able to chug along at 50 kilometers an hour, its top speed limit. We're going to try and get into position as quickly as we can. And I want to get up onto the ridge line towards the south so that we can start to put this good turret to work. And there's one thing that I forgot to mention in the garage, and that is that this tank has worse gun depression than the T-54. Sorry. A Batchat has managed to make it quickly up into the corner of the map. We put one into him. We don't want him to return fire into us. We side scrape out, but we're being pushed by a gentleman behind us up the slope who's edging us ever closer towards the Batchat. Thankfully, we put a good one into his turret. And you can see that this tank basically gets the standard Soviet 100mm. The 200mm of penetration that the tank gets is okay. Everyone works with it on the T-54. But in this kind of a matchup, to be guaranteed to penetrate your opponents, you really are going to have to fire a few heat rounds. But luckily in this replay, I'm going to show you what you can do without them. So the gun depression is very frustrating. If I was in a T-54, I would have been able to shoot that 50-120 there. But I'm not. I believe I have 4.3 degrees of gun depression in this tank. And also the elevation is slightly worse than the T-54. And this can be very frustrating and is one of the worst things about the vehicle. Our hull armor worked. It was exceedingly well angled there though. It looks like that Batchat is struggling under pressure from our team. Oh, what a disastrous miss that was. Terrible shot there. We can't finish him off. But now it's time to work on the 50B. And in this kind of a position, I feel fairly safe. He doesn't want to waste his shots on me because we're hull down and our turret armor is so strong. I tried to track him. I failed doing so, but I managed to get out of the way of his ram. He puts 2 shots right through our turret. It's very likely that he's firing APCR, and he doesn't really need to aim anywhere apart from directly at our vehicle, as this is a test server, and it's very hard to get any meaningful gameplay showing the armor of these vehicles. There's a T-62A beneath us. We bounce his first heat round. That's 330mm of penetration that we just managed to evade with our armor. We put another one through his hull, and thankfully the VK4502B finishes him off. Just showing you where those shells went through our turret. Right under the gun from the 50B. But now we're dealing with a Waffenträger Alpha 100. And this is a lovely tank to be shooting with this 100mm. This vehicle has got an excellent DPM, a great rate of fire, doing 320 alpha damage with each shot. Just too high. See if we can get him the second time. Oh, just too high again. Third time's a charm. Oh, not quite yet. And there we go, we finish him off. Now we have a Bosch 155 against us, and we load our first heat round of the game. We miss. Uh-oh, we're in trouble now. Thankfully, we managed to finish him off before he can put one into us. And so there we have it, the T-55A. The hull of a T-62A combined with the turret of a T-54. And the T-54's gun does perform exceedingly well at Tier 9, and I can't wait to pick up this tank. Here we can see the flag of the National Volksarmee, i.e. the National People's Army, which is why you're basically going to be able to play the awesome Soviet Tier 9 medium tanks such as this T-55A with a German crew. Let's just take a very quick look at the post-game stats before we finally conclude this vehicle. So this was 2026 experience received in this game with a premium account. We made 71,000 credits, achieving 4,863 damage in a very short game and picking up 3 kills on Tier 10 enemy tanks. Now I was using premium consumables in this tank that I probably wouldn't do if it wasn't the test server. And that meant that even with the huge amount of damage that we did, we barely made any credits profit, which reiterates what I said earlier, that these tanks are going to be premium in the way that you can use any crew that you want in them, but definitely not premium in the way that they earn credits. Now, I would absolutely love this vehicle if it wasn't for the gun depression disparity between the T-54 and the T-55A. The fact that it has 4.3 degrees of gun depression is horrible. That 0.7 makes a huge difference. And there's also a large change in the gun elevation. Whereas on the T-54 it's 20 degrees, on the T-55A it's 14.3 degrees. And that really lowers the situations that you can find yourself in when you are hull down, which is the strength of the Soviet medium tanks, their excellent turret armor. And this is amplified by the fact that you lose so much hull armor on the T-55A. That 20mm of hull armor lost will really punish the tank when it wants to bounce the Tier 7, the Tier 8, and even many of the Tier 9 tanks. Which is one of the key strengths of the T-54, the fact that it's just able to rip apart those lower tanks without losing the hit points that many of the Tier 9 medium tanks do. Nevertheless, I think these reward tanks are a very exciting thing, and I can't wait to pick up probably one of the prettiest Soviet medium tanks in the game, and get some extra crew training on my Leopard 1. Anyway guys, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, or it was just useful to you, please consider giving the video a like down below. It really helps the channel out. And stay tuned, I'll be doing previews on so many of the features coming up in the excellent patch that is 9.5. And let me know in the comments down below what you think about the T-55A. Basically, the hull of a T-62A and the turret of a T-54 with a slightly better performing gun that loses a touch of the flexibility with regards to its elevation and depression. Do you think this tank is novel just from the fact that it is German, or do you think that it's basically another Tier 9 Soviet medium tank and we could do without another one? Anyway guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.